We're live. Loda, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm good.
That's
Good to
good,
be
man.
here.
We're talking a bit before we started that it's been a long day for me today. The past few weeks I've had like this influx of people from Europe I've been meeting with. So last week I think every meeting of mine was 12 hours apart. So I had an
Yeah.
8 a.m. and an 8 p.m. I had a 9 a.m. and a 9 p.m. So it's yeah, it can be a bit of a killer.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's good that you keep it up though.
Yeah. So you're I guess the first question for me actually, but before you even get to introduce yourself, because this one's been burning in my head, you're just back from a tournament. How long do you
Um, kind of, yeah.
yeah, how long do you normally give yourself off and your team after a tournament to rest and recoup and get ready for the next one?
I mean, it differs a little bit. I think that for the team, I give them, or we give them some time off for sure. Uh, Usually, a few days. Usually, they will start playing some pubs by themselves. Um, but I would say anything from a few days to a week, depending on how soon the next qualifier is. I mean, for myself,
Mm.
I don't really give myself so much time off. I guess maybe one day, and then I feel like I should be back to work. I feel like the esport life, not only being players play a lot, but I also think that people that work in esports generally work a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, I never played as a high as at a as high a level as you did, but I was a semi-pro player in Australia in CS trying to go pro. And I always had that burning feeling in my mind. If I was out to dinner with my friends, I was thinking I could be at home practicing right now. I'm not even the best in Australia, let alone in the world, like I should be playing, and almost felt like a bit guilty.
Of
Did you get that?
course, though. No, I can see that. I do think though that there's a small danger in that, right? When you start thinking about how there's so many people in front of you and how you kind of have to catch up on them, because
Mm,
in some cases people have so much more experience and time put into the game than you. But I think it's just important to have long goals. But
yeah,
I mean, if I felt guilty, I don't know, not really, maybe.
yeah, and it's
More
a
more guilty about, I feel more guilty about work, like normal work, than about playing.
yeah. And it's a super easy way to burn yourself out, I found. Even for me, my last tournament, I went into that tournament feeling exhausted because I put so much pressure on myself throughout the lead up and the off season to always be practicing, always be my best that, I wasn't able to clear my mind properly and to play. Is that part of it too?
Yeah, no, I think so for sure. I think that's something that all players probably, I mean, struggle with on and off throughout their career. I mean, the mental pressure that you put on yourself. I mean, people that compete in esports are generally speaking, have competed before if it's in sports or whatnot. And then those kind of people tend to put a lot of pressure on themselves, I think for sure.
Mm, mm. All right. So, what should have been the first question? Sorry, that one just came out. It came out quickly because it was burning in my mind. But
Like,
just we're live, obviously, on LinkedIn and Twitch at the moment, and we'll be turned into an audio podcast as well. So, for those people who aren't aware of you and your history, can you just give a quick background as to who you are?
my name is Jonathan Berg, also known as Loda. I'm 31 years old. Today I'm the CEO of Alliance. Used to be pro Dota 2 player for many years. Um, quick, I'll try to do a quick introduction about myself. I don't do it so often nowadays anymore. So I started playing Dota back in the old days. This probably 15 years ago or something when I tried the game the first time, or maybe even earlier than that, back in Warcraft 3. Was quite interested in gaming, but never really, such a zealous fan. But when I started playing, or when I went to high school, I actually went to the same class as Ake, who
Yeah.
later on went on to be my teammate in some of my most successful teams, and that's kind of where my um, real drive and hunger for esports kind of started. Back then, kind of in Warcraft 3 to begin with, I would say.
Mm,
Um, Loved esport, did it for a few years, but on and off. Kind of gave up on the idea of esports becoming huge during my lifetime. I was getting older around 2021, I think, and then I decided, hey, screw this, I'll go back to, or rather, I'll go study at university. Um, and I got into an education where I studied business economics. But then it was only like 1 or 2 years into that education that TA1 was announced, and then I was like, what have I done? You know, I was great at Dota. I should really play TI. I know I can win a TI. But
Mm,
also seeing how esports was changing, I made the conscious decision to say, hey, all right, I think I can make more money going into esports, and also it's my passion. I really believe in this. I know this is gonna grow huge. So went back to playing on and off in Europe for about half a year. Then I traveled to Zenith and Southeast Asia and played there for a team for about 6 months. Competed in the first TI2, got eight. Went back to Sweden. Had an idea on how to play, how to beat the Chinese, especially, and how had this idea of building a all Swedish team to compete at TI and hopefully win it. Set out to do it and achieved it in 2013. Um, and since then, I played on and off with various results. Won a few tournaments after TA3 as well, but for sure, TA3 was the pinnacle of my career, I would say.
mm. How does it? A question I always wanted to ask, and I wish I asked PPD this before. How does it feel winning TI3 compared to say TI9 today, with such a significant difference in the prize pool? And also, is there a
Mm.
difference overall you feel in the skill because the game has been out for so many more years?
I mean, yes, I think that the feeling, if I understand it correctly from other players, I think the feeling will always be somewhat similar. I mean, winning money is amazing, and I think that winning $15 million instead of $1.5 million is I'm sure there's some difference in how it feels, but I honestly think that winning
Mm,
TA is, as I said, even though the prize pool has always been very high, even when it was 1.5 millions, that was still considered very, very high. I think it was never really
yeah.
about the money. TI is this. It really shows that you're the best Dota team that year.
Mm,
And no one can ever take that away from you. Being the best at something, I think that's what makes it more special than anything. I think that what made it so special for OG winning it 2 times is just that, that they won TI 2 times. They're the best Dota team probably ever in Dota 2, or at least so far.
mm.
And sure, I'm sure they're very happy that they're very rich men. But honestly, I like to believe that it's the thing that matters the most to people competing in this game is winning and being the best, being able to say you're the best. There's something special in that.
It sounds super similar to spend a lot of time talking to StarCraft 2 players when I worked at Thermaltake, sponsoring like Team Prime from Korea and such. And, they would say pretty much the same thing. If the GSL for them was a $1 prize pool, they would rather win that than any MLG, any ISF tournament or anything else that was going on at that time, because it means you're the best in Korea, which means you're the best in the world, undisputed.
Yeah, no, I really think so. And I mean, TA is a different tournament in so many other ways as well, because I think teams that go there really show up to perform, and
Mm,
I don't know, it's really the best Dota has to offer every year, I would say, and then them winning that, it's such a special feeling. When it comes to skill, I mean, I would say yes, of course, people have gotten better. I think that in probably anything in this world, people always get better. Even in traditional sports, I think that people will
mm,
always improve. Does that mean that? I don't think that the skill level in that sense is that different, but there are so many more good players and good teams today. When we won back in TI3, I mean, there were quite a few good teams, but I'm trying to remember, but I wouldn't say that, more than maybe top eight were really tier one. I wouldn't say that more than top three out of those top eight could really compete at the same level when maybe us, Navi, LGD were at such a huge level. I think today the amazing thing is that there are so many teams that, I mean, if we look at tier one, I would say we almost have, like, looking at the major, at least we have 16 teams that are tier one, and in between, maybe 13 out of those 16 teams, I think almost anyone can take a game from anyone, depending on the day. I still think there are some dominant forces in Dota 2 still, but overall, I think that's the biggest difference, is that the overall level is much higher.
Yeah, it was good you mentioning about how, like, the skill of games and the caliber is always so much higher at TI. I almost, as a fan, I almost get nervous every year thinking, I really hope this TI is going to be another good one, and it always turns out that way. And for me, as someone who never really played MOBAs in the past, TI3 was what got me into Dota. So I know that the marketing exercise of TI does work a bit because, as with many other players, Dota was too hard. Started playing some League of Legends, maybe played a little bit of Heroes of New Earth before it died off. But, the whole grandeur of TI3, the amazing things that happen, the hype around various Echo Slams and puck coils and all this kind of stuff, really drives it home to someone. And it seems to be such a great marketing exercise.
No, I like to think so. I mean, it's a special way of promoting a game by always having the highest prize pool in the world, but yeah, it works. I think so.
Yeah, so we got into this discussion a bunch with PPD before. Same question I want to ask you about the way the whole DPC and TI works. I'd love to get your thoughts about it. For those people who don't know, basically what's geared up around is, there's various Dota 2 events that happen throughout the year. If you win them or place highly, you get points that qualify you for the International, which is a monumental, $30+ million prize pool in these days. But it means that all of the money and a lot of the attention for Dota 2 really is condensed into one single event. So I'd love to get your thoughts about, the what that does to the scene as a whole, Loda, and maybe, if you had a magic wand and you could be king for a day.
I mean,
how would you
what does to the scene? That there's TI that is the pinnacle of it, or overall the whole system?
Yeah, what do you think TI does to the whole system? Like, is it beneficial? Because obviously, League of Legends is an, you could say, an opposite game, but also an absolute opposite way that things are run compared to Dota.
I don't really think that. I mean, TA is such a weird tournament, right? Because it does put some shadow on the rest of the year. But I mean, that being said, I really don't think the issue is that the prize pool is so incredibly big. I just think that, there's so much more focus on TI as a whole, and the way it's produced and all of these things, that it also puts the rest of the season into shadow a little bit, I guess. But I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing. I just think that, honestly, the DPC system and also how some of those tournaments are held and produced could be very improved as a whole. So I won't really comment too much about TI. When it comes to the DPC system as a whole, I mean, I think it's a fairly good system. I mean, I'm not sure if you read those recent notes that Liquid posted about the next season, when they're going to have regional leagues and whatnot. And I do think that a combination of that and majors is probably the best. If what they said, that it's regional leagues, and then there's going to be 3 majors that these regional leagues go into. To me, it makes a little bit more sense, as long as you make these majors really feel like mini TIs, rather than in some previous seasons when there's been so many majors happening that they don't really feel like anything. They're just another tournament, and that's something I think is important to go away from. I also think that standalone tournaments, because as that is today, DPC, the only way to get points for the DPC system is playing majors or minors, and that's how you get to TI. I do think that standalone tournaments should maybe give some DPC points, even if it's very, very minor ones, would make sense to me. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, but my
Spread it out.
how I watch the overall, how I see or view the overall system and compare it to League and Riot. I mean, I think that League does it very, very well. I mean, I would guess that Valve has seen some good points in what League does, and that's why they want to do regional leagues, and then
Mm.
maybe have them funnel into playoffs or majors where the regions play each other. Um, if it should be a franchise, that's probably not something I would want to see for Dota. Maybe if we could have a standalone tournament organizer organizing a franchise league, I think that would be better rather than. I think that this idea of Dota where anyone can make it and you can go through a qualifier anytime and even make it all the way to TI. I think that there's
Yeah.
something beautiful in that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. One comment you said near the start was around you think there's some major gaps in the tournaments that are leading up to TI. There's been a lot of discussion around like very weak storytelling in esports. Do you think that's part of it? Is it the content, people not
Yes,
understanding who's playing and
I
what
don't
the
even
history is?
think it's the. I don't even think it's content people. I think there's many talented content people out there, and I think that a lot of teams have resources or can get people to help with that. But in many cases, and I will probably get flamed for saying this, but I think in many cases, and this is probably the biggest issue with TI and the TI prize pool being so insanely big, is that for
Mm,
players, if you compare everything with TI and how much money you can win at TI, it's very easy to, argue that nothing else is worth putting your time or effort on than playing Dota 2 and trying to do well at TI.
mm,
And I think that has led to almost a culture, especially from like the old guard of Dota players that have been around for a long time. They've gotten used to that, and I think that in many cases they have not shared the story. I think that's what OG did, and I mean I think probably they've gotten a little bit pushed by Red Bull as well for it happening. But I think
mm,
what they did and then sharing their story not only through True Sight but their own documentary. I think that's amazing. That's exactly what's needed. I think that storylines and storytelling is what drives entertainment, like esports. I honestly think so.
yeah.
I'm gonna let you continue with some questions, but I could talk about this for a long time because I think if you look at Dota, you can see correlations between player base, an increase in overall player base, and good storylines. I really believe so. Because when you see something or you can share this emotion about what's going on, you want to be a part of that. You want to do that, and then you go play a
Mm,
game of Dota 2 because you want to be a TI. I think there are a few TI finals that have been really, really good. TI 3 being one of them, TI 8 being another one, I'd say.
mm,
I wouldn't really call TI 9 the same one, but maybe because it was not as epic to see OG versus Liquid as OG versus LGD.
mm.
Um, but also, yeah. But back to what you said, I think it's 100% true. I think the storylines, we need to be better at that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think touching like what you were saying too, you mentioned about like the old guard and stuff. I feel like sometimes there's a special elitism in esports where they don't take influencers and content creators seriously. And I feel like that is part of our downfall as well, because there's so many content creators that are good at telling their own story in exactly ways like you were saying, that I think if they got paid a bit more attention to. Because I've had this discussion a lot with tournament operators who see content creators as a necessary evil, to include them in your tournament and to pay them to help you sell tickets and things like that. But I think they deserve a bit more respect, because that's literally what their whole job and their whole life is to do, like what you're saying a lot of the time, is
I
to create
mean,
content
more
about them.
respect. I don't know if that's true, honestly. I mean, I know that there's quite a few content creators out there in Dota 2, especially, that are just as respected as any pro players. I think that's something new, though, that is a way of solving it, right? Or working around it, is that you employ content creators maybe to tell a
Yeah.
story instead of the players.
Mm.
But I understand what you mean, but I honestly don't really think it's true for Dota 2 at least. I think everyone has quite high respect for content creators nowadays, at least the most recent year.
I
Yeah.
think your comments about OG rung pretty true as well. Obviously, they've kind of struck gold with Red Bull, creating so much
Yeah.
content for them. But as a case study, most of those guys are not outgoing in any way, like Topson and Arna,
Yeah.
and still there's amazing content that can be generated about them. Like, look at how often Arna tweets compared to a normal pro. It's once every 8 months if you're lucky. But
Yeah.
people still want to see that story on camera, and the Red Bull media team, it looks like they've been able to drag that out.
No, I think so for sure. And I think for Anna, he probably would want to do as little as possible from anything. But he's an awesome kid, honestly, and I think that's understandable when you perform as well he does. But yes, Red Bull has done that well, and it really shows, as you say, like every story is interesting. You don't want to hear only about the obvious players on the team. Like the amazing thing about Dota and MOBA, generally speaking, is that usually there's very unique kind of people on the team, and they're not the same at all. That's why the same logic doesn't really apply for different teams, because it comes down to people and people being so different. But it's like, as you said, seeing Anna say 3 lines in True Sight, it's more entertaining than seeing someone else say 10 of them. So I
Yeah.
understand what you mean. I mean, for us, we with our previous team, which is now with Liquid, I mean, we were in a little bit of a weird spot in the org, but we really wanted to, because we started off with them as kind of, I would call it, I don't know, tier 3, maybe tier 2.5. But we believed, and especially Kelly from our team, believed that people want to see this road as well. The people want to see the struggle. People want to see, they don't only want to see people win. They want to see, how do you make it as an esport pro? How do you make from being, how do you make it from being, maybe an 18-year-old kid to becoming a professional? And we did it on very low budget, and did more of a classic vlog kind of style, but it worked out much better than I expected, and same thing there. I think that we should tell all the stories, or as many as possible, at least. No, not only the teams that win, because winning, we've all seen a lot of people win, but it's also entertaining to see people go through those real struggles. I think so.
Yeah, yeah. And I think one for me, as a fan of the Dota scene and watching where eyeballs are going, it seems like Nico Baby is one of those people, for you. And as soon as we started the Twitch stream, there's one guy who's been spamming Nico Baby almost nonstop since we started.
Okay.
That looks like a story that people want to see.
Yeah, of course. I love the kid, honestly. I think Nico is. It's funny because I wanted to add him to Alliance maybe 2 years ago, first time. I really thought he would be a good addition to even that previous team. But then after this TI, we kind of just, I mean, we kept in contact throughout all this time, and it just made sense. But what I like about him is that he's pure passion, and he's a cool guy. He has a lot of tattoos and all of these things, but more than anything, I think that he wants to win, and he has this insane drive, and I think that makes him entertaining by itself, because yeah, but for sure. And I mean, I don't think he's watching this right now, but I would love to do more content with him as well, because I think his story is very entertaining. He's quite different from a lot of other Dota players that I met, but very exciting to work with. Yeah.
So keeping exactly like that in mind, what you said, one of the main things that I think was a snippet for us that PPD brought up was most Dota players don't feel it's worth their time doing any sort of content because they really do want to focus on TI and a big paycheck for winning. How do you, as a player yourself, but also now managing them, kind of balance that act between asking someone to give up their practice time, which in their heads might make them perform less to earn some extra money or to pay for their salary and their position on the team?
Yeah, I mean, for me, honestly, the thing is, everyone plays so freaking much. It's, I mean, comparing esports to, might have to get some water.
That's okay.
Comparing esports to traditional sports, I think an esports player plays, or a gamer or whatever you want to call it, plays much more
Yeah.
than a normal athlete, practice their sport. So I think in most cases for me, it's just that I don't think necessarily that you're going to be a better player because you play even more than you are today. I think that for a lot of teams and a lot of players, they have so much else to grow on to to become good enough to win T. I really think so. For a lot of people, they have to grow up, they have to become good teammates, and doing content in the right way can be a way of working on that as well. I think you shouldn't always do what you want. You should always do things that you think is difficult. I mean, if you're just as a simple example, I think that if you as a Dota player or professional or esport competitor, you don't like being in front of the camera, you don't like answering questions, you don't like doing interviews. I think, hey, okay, sure, we shouldn't force him to do it all the time, but I mean, at the same time, it does seem like you have some kind of, I don't know if it's a confidence issue or if it's don't want to be seen in front of camera, or if it's something that keeps you not wanting to do this. And then I think it's important to push these people to maybe not do this all the time, but at least feel confidence and relaxed doing interviews, because that's what I'm saying, like getting used to all different kind of situations and not letting it get to you or like messing with your head. I think that's honestly quite a good skill to have, because it's almost like mental strength, right? Like you do anything and go through anything.
Yeah, and pulling out, a few things are like what you're saying. It's the old adage of work smarter, not harder, right? There used to be this old thing, like for me in my playing career with CS:GO, the reason that my team was able to go from nobodies in the tier 3 of Australia to probably top 4, top 6 ranks is because we were complete nerds about the game and understood how to study. And that was in an early stage of esports where people would brag about how many hours a day they do deathmatch, and they'd brag about how they wouldn't watch replays and demos and they wouldn't study.
No, but I understand that, and I agree, and that's what I think is so weird. Even today, sometimes people are kind of overestimates how well everyone else does it, and I like maybe that's not really answering or going on to your question, but I feel it's true. Like people underestimate that you can come up with something really unique, even if you're not the best, or maybe if you're tier 3 or whatever. Like you might have a unique idea, and you might look at it a different way. Maybe like you guys did back then. I mean, nowadays people for sure analyze replays and all the plays in the different directions, but there might be some other way that you makes your team unique in practicing.
Yeah, and like you were saying, for us, we were in no way the most experienced and most skilled, but we just out-nerded everyone. It was simply the fact that we understood the game mechanics and just spent so many hours doing that, and we didn't need to have the raw aim, because if you can flashbang someone or you have the perfect...
No, for sure. And I think that's the beauty in a lot of... I mean, I wouldn't say all, because I can't remember right now, but I think in many games, even in CSGO or Dota 2, I love the fact that strategy can beat skill. And skill can beat strategy as well. Like you know what I mean there? That sometimes a player and a team will beat you even though they have a worse strategy, but they're just that good that they just destroy what should have been won. And in the other direction, where such much better players, they get kicked out in a open qualifier game because they didn't really expect this other team to have this really well thought out strategy. And
Yeah. So for you, I mean, there's a question I get asked all the time, and it's what's the lifespan of a player, and when does a player know when they need to retire? Hang up the mouse. What about you? If I asked you that question.
A lifespan of a player. Wow, that's a hard question. I think that, I mean, depending on when you
Mm,
become a pro player, I think that's probably easily 10 years. I mean, if you start at 16, you play to 26, I think you can play. And I mean, I don't think there's a magic number. I think that you can play even until you're 30, probably. I just think that the issue is that, competing at a top level when it comes to esports, I think it takes a lot from you. And,
mm,
and you need to really make it your number one priority in your life, above girlfriend, above family in many cases. Sadly, but it's just how it is, and I think that makes it harder when you get older to have the same focus and drive and just natural hunger and passion, that I believe that you need. Uh, I also
mm.
do believe that the mechanical skill does go down, but it probably varies a little bit between people and people. I also think that certain roles could maybe be filled by a older player. Let's say you're a POS 5 and you're maybe a little bit worse mechanically, but you have a ton of experience and leadership and drafting maybe. I don't know. For
Mm,
myself, when did I quit? Like 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago? Was I 29 or 20? I think I was 29 and I was about to turn 30. I think that
mm.
was for me probably. I mean, it's hard to say. I think that for me, in a sense, it was a little bit too late, but it was more about where I was in life. So I hadn't really felt like I could commit myself and compete in the same way. And I don't think I had. It became more and more about not losing to me and less so about winning. And I think that's for
Yeah,
sure
right.
something that, like, looking at it afterwards, I feel like, hey, that was a very clear sign that I should have stopped. Uh, but yeah, I don't really think it's an easy answer to that. Uh,
Mm,
but for sure, when it comes to like playing mid, for example, I think that it's a much shorter lifespan of how long a player can be the best in the world playing mid, for sure. I think we're talking just about a few years.
yeah. Yeah, the other player I got to answer that question was DSN, ex Fnatic CS 1.6
Yeah,
player, and yeah, and he gave some similar answers, and obviously from the same home country as you as well. And he gave some similar answers, and we were talking specifically about I think it was Zist because we were watching him on stage at
yeah,
IEM Sydney, who's an ex teammate of his, saying, he was saying, look, I think Zist has a couple of years left before you can kind of spot it, I guess, from the outside as an ex-player. And in Counter-Strike, obviously, there's so many Twitch movements that need to happen, and it's, do you move down to that in-game leader role or that support rifler role the same way in Dota? Do you move down to that POS 4 or 5, or do you even want to if you're used to being the position one carry all the time?
yeah.
Is that?
No, exactly. No, I think that's a really, really good question. I mean, that was the thing for me, right? Like, I think in many ways I would have really suited to be +5 because in most teams that I played in, I was leading, but maybe from a carry role or another role.
Mm-hmm.
But I could never really, and I tried to force myself to like it, but I could never really love playing 5 as much as I loved playing carry or mid or off lane. And yeah, I don't really think that was for me either. So I understand what you mean there. Like, of course,
Mm.
it might not feel right, but that's why I think like certain players they want to keep playing, keep competing forever, and under any circumstances, and they can switch between all of the roles. I think that Kuroki and is a player that has done that really well. I mean, he was,
Mm.
he's a really, really old school player. He has played probably every role, just like me. He was, I used to be one of the best mid players in the world back in Dota 1. Kuroki was the guy who took that throne from me later on he went to carry just as I did, and then later after that he went to 5. So
Mm.
I mean, obviously it is possible for some.
Do, do you find there's like, is there like a typecast of person who plays various roles in Dota, or does it really change from your experience? Like, do you find that a 5 is different? Because I guess, someone from the outside might say a 5 is a bit more nervous and quiet, but then you've got Anna, who blows that mold out of the water as a carry.
Do you mean that Anna is quiet and is a carry, and that's
Yeah,
more?
yeah. Like, do you find a typecast of mid players are a
No,
certain way versus
I
carry
don't. I
versus
mean,
bottom?
not really. I think that there are, for carry roles is often either off. Either they're this really outspoken, kind of cocky, happy guy that just wants to look good and do well, and or they're the opposite where they're very very quiet and that they just focus on
Mm,
doing their part, but they don't really lead. They don't really, they will farm for 35 minutes and then they're like, okay, let's go end game, and
yeah.
then you have game. You know what I mean? No, it's true. I would, maybe I'm wrong, but I sometimes when I look at Niche, I feel like he looks a little bit like that. Maybe not now that he plays mid, but previously when he played carry.
Mm.
Um,
So
but I
like
do.
a Samael and an Arteezy versus an Ana or something, which is what is
Yeah,
the
no,
what
I
I'm
think
getting
I
here.
think
Yeah.
so. I think so. And I'm probably more of the, outspoken, cocky kind of guy. I think Nico Baby is a little bit more like that as well.
Mm,
Because I do think that the strength of that, I mean, there are different strengths and different ways of doing it in every team. And I think that OG had a very, very, very good mix of players and personalities. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to, right? Like, I think that you can't have too many of the same kind of person. You can't have a mid player and a carry player that both are that kind of guy. And maybe that's why RTC and Sumail never really won any major tournaments together, because I do think there's a truth to that.
mm,
Maybe No-Tail feel that more outspoken, or Seb, for example, role in OG. And I
mm,
think that, for example, there is probably either of them, kind of rallying the troops and rallying the morale during the game, like I did from the carry role. But it can differ for sure. I think that one thing, though, that I do think is, I feel like more often than not, the offlane player is a quiet guy that likes to do his own thing. Kind of like the lone wolf. That's a role that
yeah.
I feel to this day is for sure the most reoccurring personality type.
Yeah, that's interesting. And there was I guess trying to wrap up the player questions before we like get into some more business stuff. There was a really good question someone put forward to me on Facebook around mental training. I
Mm.
like a major thing I notice now, and this especially happens with FPS games where, back when I was playing 2013, any single time you got a single kill, the whole team was exploding, they were yelling, they were screaming. But now everybody's so much more cool, calm, and collected. You'll see someone
Yeah,
do a 1v3 clutch, they'll do a fist bump, they won't even blink. You'll see
yeah.
Arna win TI and he won't talk. You'll see, there's similar things with Team Liquid as well when they perform well, and with yourself and others. So how does someone go about that mental training? Do you have a mental coach? Is it just you from experience talking to your players, or how does that work?
I think it differs a bit from team to team. I think, back in TA3, I think it was a lot maybe me and Aki, I would say, to some extent, who had this experience and could kind of teach the other guys. And it also worked quite well with these other players, Bulldog, S4, and EGM, like being that personality type. So we were always calm, and we felt like
Mm,
getting too excited was usually a risk rather than enough of a plus side. Then again, I'm also quite a vocal player, that I do really believe that in certain cases you should make your team believe. You know what I mean? Like, the way
mm,
you shout or whatnot, you just make your team believe that this is the right move, and they will follow you in. And even if they don't believe it, you end up winning the fight, right? So I think there's always a balance between these things. With mental coach and how you train it, I think the same thing there. It differs from team to team. I think that certain teams, they have a really strong leader that can maybe kind of hold others under their wing. I think that with our previous team, we employed a mental coach uh, for quite some time, because we noticed that there were playing on stage was difficult for us back then, and
Mm.
with that team, and I could help to a certain extent because I did focus on more of mental coaching and everything around more so than the game. But I think it was good to bring in a professional to help them out there. At the same time, it's up to people and players themselves to how much they use things and how much they value them. I feel like sometimes when you bring in these people, it's 10% out of 100% of what they say that actually gets to the players. But sometimes that's enough
Mm.
that it will make a difference when you're playing. Yeah.
One thing I also really wanted to ask you was what's special about Sweden that brings so much pedigree in esports? There's so much positive history in Dota. There's so much positive history in Counter-Strike. There's been a few StarCraft players and even Heroes of New Earth. Like, is there something? Is it the culture? Is it the support, government, how schools set up? Like why is there so much out of Sweden as a small
I
country?
wouldn't I wouldn't say it's much due to the government or the schools. I don't think so. Maybe that there is more room to pursue, things outside of career or studies or these things. That
Yeah.
makes it so that we have maybe more people that are successful in unique, I don't know, what do you call it, businesses or sectors. It's also very cold and dark during winter, so we have a lot of
Mm.
time to spend inside. Um, but I think obviously it's a combination of all the things, but I do think we have quite a good culture when it comes to letting people do special stuff, because usually our parents are pretty much like, hey, do what you love. You need to be able to take care of yourself, of course, but it's not go be a doctor or anything like that. It's more about find what you love and do that if you can.
Mm. And I can't remember who told me. It was another person from Sweden I talked to. It was either DSN or maybe Khan. Something about Sweden being quite early to get high-speed internet as well,
Ah,
really
that's very
pushing
true.
forward.
That's actually very true. I do think that's for sure important important thing.
Mm, mm. So as another super common question that I get is, hey, my kid's 15 years old. They seem to be very good at Fortnite. How do I help them turn this into something that's real? There's obviously unlimited amounts of pathways if you play soccer or hockey or swimming or anything like that. Do you have any basic suggestions for a mother or father of a 15-year-old who looks like they've got some skill and they want to help nurture them to become a pro player?
I mean, I think that there are. I mean, even in Fortnite, I think that there are ways to see if somebody's really good. I think that there, in many cases, people come and ask you and say, "Oh, I think my son is really good," and sure, they might be quite good, but they're not really exceptional. And I think that to
Yeah.
commit to
Yeah.
esports, you honestly need to be exceptional. It's not just this you beat some of your friends. It has to be that if you go play with 10 people, they will notice you. If you go play with 20 people, they will notice you.
Mm,
But for sure, if you give those signals that you are that good, I mean, wow, I think that today, for example, there are options, more options. So rather, I would say rather than when we were young. No, but I think that, for
yeah.
example, something we do today, we work with this Australian company, actually had a partnership this year, um, or from last year, Mogul, which
Mm,
offers like, tournaments and competition or practice, I would say, in a different way than just playing ladder. I think it's still lacking though, and that's the whole reason why we're working with these guys. I think that's something that
yeah.
has to be improved in Dota, but other games as well. Where there has to be a better place for people who are, quite good. They want to become the best, and just playing ladder might not be the way to get there. What's the tip I can get? I mean, look at your favorite players, learn from them, but more than anything, I think that one of the most important things of becoming really, really good is, find other people at your own level, probably better. I would always find someone better than myself to learn from.
Mm.
Of course, it's not as simple as going to signing up for a football club and going there to train, but I think that logic is still somewhat the same. That having a group of people around you that wants to become better just as much as you, and being able to find people that are better than you, even if you know that you will end up being better than them one day. There's quite a lot to learn, honestly. Uh, but the fast answer is there is no simple way to get into esports today. I think you have
Mm.
to be noticed. That's why people stream as well. I think because it's a way of being seen, being discovered.
Yeah, and I think an important thing that you said is gain experience in different ways, not just through ladder. Put yourself in competition type scenarios, and thinking
Exactly.
back to when I was a player, there, CS:GO was quite honestly a terrible game when it first came out, and there was nothing to compete in besides a single online league. And I thought, well, if I want to be pro, I need to play live. I need to get that live experience, being a youngster new to the scene. So I made my own LAN, and then
Yeah.
started inviting teams, and it became a 16 team ordeal. But just trying to put yourself in those other
No,
situations, and like you said, it's not just about ladder.
I think that's a perfect example. Exactly of what I mean. Like you can't just wait for people to notice you. You can't just be like, "Oh, I'm super good. Why am I not invited to a good team?" It's like, there are 500 billion people now, but you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you need to do something different to be noticed. I mean, even me back in the day, I thought I was really good, but people wouldn't invite me, wouldn't invite me to good leagues and good games, and I kind of just had to pester people and find the right friends, and then bit by bit, you were invited to one in-house game, and then suddenly you were one of the good guys. And I think just like you
mm,
said there, like organizing something, organize your own tournament. Why don't you do that? Because then at least you will find everyone else that signs up for that tournament. They will have the same focus and ideas as you, and yeah,
yeah,
being
yeah. I think that's part of why Counter Strike, with limited developer support up until recently, is such a strong esports title, because there's always been so much content. There's always been dream hacks. There's always been multiple online leagues. There's always been MLG dipping their toes in, and ESL around for tens of dozens of years. Creating content all the time for people to compete in, to become better than others,
yeah.
and that's how the champions are made.
No, I think you're right, and that's probably a good point that I haven't really thought so much about. But I do think that that's a place where Dota, and I think he will be improved for next season.
Mm,
But where a lot of the online tournaments have disappeared, perhaps
yeah,
because to be relevant, everything has been kind of top heavy around those teams, and they stopped playing the online tours. But I still think we're gonna go back into that direction as well. Um, I have a very, I mean, I was there at the meeting with Valve the other week when they discussed this new DPC
mm,
system and all of the things they have in mind for Dota. And I think that Dota has been in a weird place for some time, but I honestly look at the future very bright. I just think that it's important that everyone, including players and organizations and Valve maybe and TOs, like come together and push storylines a lot and do content
yeah.
for sure.
There's a really good question in the Twitch chat from AG Murdercore, and now that you've moved from being a player into being a coach, owner, and CEO yourself, how do your biggest challenges change? Like, what are your biggest challenges now? Is it balancing time between different things? Is it putting the business hat and suit on, or
Wow, how my challenges have changed. I mean, they've changed very much. I think that being a player is and being a captain and it's a very hard and stressful and straining life, but it's also a very simple life in a sense that I mean, it's not a simple life. That's not what I mean, but it
focus?
makes life simple because it's like either you're good or you're bad, either you're successful or you're not. Everything shows you all the time if you're doing the right thing, I guess. You know what I mean? Like success is so you can measure it. uh, being a CEO, I mean, it's been different challenges all around, but I think that it that's probably a little bit harder for me sometimes. That they're not always clear. Like, am I doing a good job? Am I a good boss? Am I all these things? Um,
Mm.
but I also think, I mean, now I've been CEO for 2.5 years. I think the first 1 year was very difficult, and I think learning to not only be responsible for people on a different level, but for me, it was hard. I mean, maybe a little bit similar to being a captain in Dota. It was hard not taking things personal, sometimes. But overall, the challenges are very, very different. But it gets better. And it's much easier now than it was 1 year ago. But the biggest challenge, if I should say anything, is probably that I don't really know how to ever stop, maybe, or take a break, or not think about it.
Mm.
Being the CEO, it's always so much you can do,
Yeah.
and I want to work with the Dota team, but then I have to work on business sides of things, and yeah, it's many challenges. But I think this year finally is when I've kind of come to a point where it's okay that I'm not there with the Dota team. They can perform without me. They are a strong team in their own, and I don't have to be involved in everything.
Mm.
So it's a
Mm.
small victory, I guess.
You're not, and you're definitely not alone in that thinking, and that feeling that you have about always wanting to perform, and there's always more work to be done. I think that there's a collective lot of us that work in the esports industry who all feel that, and sometimes it's even myself and talking to other business owners that we feel the weight of the industry. We've been around for a long time, and it's up to us to help grow the industry. And not only do you have employees who are relying on you for their salary to pay their mortgage and to feed their children and to grow a future, but also you care so much about esports that you remember what it was like
Yeah,
when you and I were 16 and there wasn't any tournaments we could
no,
win more
exactly.
than a can of Coca-Cola or something like that. And we want to keep it growing and keep it going.
No, I think so for sure. I mean, I don't think I would not be in alliance if not for those reasons. Honestly, and I think, especially for us, it's a little bit difficult. Also, when we're a player-owned org, we're still one of the few orgs that haven't brought in investments from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And when you compare yourself with some of these other juggernauts out there that have so much more resources to do things, it's also the same thing there. Like, almost a little bit as I told you earlier in the conversation about how I think that players and esports players, you shouldn't have these short goals, because then you're like, I need to catch up to these people now.
Yeah.
I kind of have to remind myself about that sometimes. That
Yeah.
okay, we need to have reasonable goals. But yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to make unfair comparisons, right? Especially, and you see this happen a bit. Um, some people in Australia call them money orgs. When a money org comes in, they're not born out of players like
Yeah,
yourself or OG or even EG. With that long history in it, and they come in with the money, and then you can kind of feel, hey, where's my money? Like, how did these guys raise $30 million and they only existed for a year? I've been
for,
in the trenches playing for a long time, and you can feel a bit hard done by, I guess is probably the word, or yeah.
for sure. And I think that's something I had to accept as well. But I mean, that might feel unfair sometimes, but I think the only time that I really get frustrated by it is probably when they come in, and you've probably seen this as well. Like, it's less and less so, and I think that especially players have started to trust these new players in the scene less and less, maybe, so that they do then tend to stick with the more established brands. But when somebody comes in and they just throw money around, and as you say, I'm like, where did they get this money? Who did they raise it with? They pay players obscene amounts of money, which is fine because we want players to do well. But then they make an exit, 1 year later, because they didn't get what they were expecting. And we've been part of building esports. We've been part of making things valuable. And when
Mm.
they come in this way, they kind of just they're a threat to the stability of the ecosystem. So I would say that's what makes me the most frustrated.
Mm.
And I mean, the only way we can deal with these big players nowadays is just we have to reinvest almost all of our money into the company to be able to be competitive.
Yeah, I have a good case study of a team in my region around that where they had some money and under the guise of or explanation of I really want to look after my players, they paid much higher salaries than everyone else, but didn't have any money left to do business development, to get
Yeah,
sponsors, to tell a story. And by trying to look after their players, they did the worst thing. They killed their company and their players were out of a job because they couldn't afford to, keep the lights on because they were just paying such obscene amounts. And that made our scene quite unstable for a while, but we're seeing a correction here with salaries, which is good. But, it was similar what you were saying with the money orgs. It was small leagues in Australia where a single team could cost you $1 million a year in flights, accommodation, and in salaries. And $1 million a year for a tier one
no,
CSGO team is a lot of money.
that's insane for me. I mean, you could get a, I mean, a CS team is quite a bit more expensive than that today, but
Mm.
you can get a fairly decent CS:GO team for that. And that's what I mean, right? And players, they will always want high salaries and all these things, but I do think that's important to keep in mind. Like for all of us that care about esports and even compete in esports and want to see things improve because they will keep improving and your salaries will go up. We want to have serious partners that there has to be some kind of revenue model or business model behind it. It's not that you have to make money straight away after 1 year. That's very difficult, but there has to be these long-term goals because there's been bubbles. I think you should. I don't even know when this was, 2007 maybe, when Warcraft 3 kind of blew up and suddenly Grubby and Moon were paid thousands and thousands of dollars where no one else was paid more than 500. After that there was a bubble,
Yeah.
and it's just, I think esports will prevail no matter what, but those are the things that might set us back a few years if we don't keep in mind. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And like you were saying, if you think Counter-Strike Source, the Championship Gaming Series, the same stuff as well. Fatality being reported to be on $1 million salary to commentate a game he doesn't have any idea about. And yeah,
exactly.
crazy, bikini models holding up round cards and televised when it didn't need to be in third person for Counter-Strike, which was ridiculous in its own right. But
Yeah,
yeah, you
no.
definitely get that. Yeah. What about for you? There's been, and I can't ignore it, there's been so many questions in Twitch as well as asked to me directly around there's so many teams that are expanding into other countries right now.
Mm.
Optic was probably the first into India with CSGO, but we all know that went badly due to some cheating issues. FaZe Clan has gone into Southeast Asia. Cloud9, LGD, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see that as a cheap and viable expansion plan for you guys as you're looking to keep the cost down?
Uh, I mean, that was a double question, I would say, but yes, I would say straight out yes. I think that for us, it will be a very natural step to take, mostly due to the fact that we have a huge part of our following in Southeast Asia. And
Mm.
that's always been a long set goal that we would return there in some sense. Meeting our fans there, it's amazing, and being able to do that. I mean, maybe not in Dota, but let's say mobile gaming or India, as you mentioned, it's very interesting for sure. For PUBG Mobile, as a ton of people already know, and I would say yes. We want to expand, especially into these regions. I wouldn't just say that it's cheap because some of them are less cheap than you would expect them to be. Uh,
Mm.
but these growing markets are very exciting, and the fans are very passionate. And I would say that's also a big reason why I would want to expand into one of these regions. And I wouldn't be too surprised if we do in one way or another this year.
So far, what's been the best and easiest games for you to work in? Are there any specific titles that have brought you really, easy expansion? Any that have brought high returns compared to others?
Wow. I don't know if there are any games in Dota. I mean, in esport as a whole, that gives high returns. I think that Dota has always been our core game, and it's a game that we've been able to work well around. I think that a
Mm,
lot of teams that enter Dota have a hard time making the business kind of work out. And I do think has a lot to do with the fact that it's a highly competitive game for sure.
mm,
Um, but I do think if you do perform, there is money to be made. Um, but I mean, it's hard to say. I think that almost all games are depends quite a lot on sponsors and their interest into the games, and that will affect things. I mean, there were a few years ago when we went into H1C1, which I think was both a good game. Honestly, I really enjoyed that one, uh, and the tournament structure was good, and the revenue sharing and all of these things made the whole thing work and make sense. And it was ran by someone who wasn't really. I won't even go into that discussion at all. But
a
TLDR
lot of
is that
discussion.
the league probably bankrupt. So that didn't end up being a great experience either. But I do think that
Mm,
I just want to say what I'm trying to say is that I think that all games are possible to make viable and as a business. Honestly, it's just that it's not easy, and I think that's what people are looking for in many of these cases. An easy way to make these games work, and I think that
yeah.
yeah, it's difficult for all teams almost, and I think it's more about building something around the game, maybe like FaZe are doing. I think FaZe are a very good example. Building this fan culture and an engagement, and finding other ways to make money rather than from their esport part. I mean, for us, we're still competitive, and Dota is that game, but
Mm,
yeah,
mm.
that's just a comment from my side. I don't think esport is easy. I don't think it's supposed to be easy either. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And I think, like we said, with the quote unquote money orgs, they prove time and time again that it's not easy. That, Optic can get bought out and be such a, long history in esports and can be essentially dead in a couple of years. And,
no, you're
EG being another case, being at the top for many, many years of esports and then virtually disappearing before, coming back recently. Yeah,
yeah,
it definitely happens.
and I mean, I think that we're somewhat in a similar space at them. I would say where they were. Honestly, I mean, now we're at a much better place. But when I took over 2.5 years ago, we were a terrible place. We had been having the org as a Swedish entity for maybe 1 year, I think. I've still been playing. We'd kind of lost, connection with our roots, I would say, in many ways, and had to, kind of crawl back from that. And it was difficult for us as well. But I think that, um, yeah, it is, if you make the wrong decisions and you don't really keep track of what you're doing, you might disappear. And I think that's the reality of esports today.
Mm,
And I would say that's the main reason why perhaps we as well um, are looking to secure investments is to have a little bit more of a safety net around it. Um,
mm. That's a perfect segue because that was my next question. You stated before that you haven't taken any outside investment yet, and I was going to ask, why? What are the plans for the future? And so you've kind of already started into that. What sort of investment are you looking for? Is there any particular type of money or type of partner that you would prefer over any others?
before I answer that, I'll just say, like, the thing is for us that we've been along a long time as a brand, and then previously both EG and Alliance and fair amount of other teams were owned by Good Game agency, which was bought up by Amazon or Twitch.
Mm,
Um, and we kind of thought that would bring us to the next level as an org, but then it was a weird situation where Twitch was kind of owning too much of the space, and owning teams as well became not really feasible for them anymore.
yeah.
So that's when we took over. So based on that, we were always a little bit. We wanted to build the grounds of this company before we kind of looked to bring in investment, I would say. But when it comes to what kind of investment, I mean, we've talked to quite a few different groups, and last year there was one big deal that almost went through. And I mean, it depends a lot. I mean, for us, I think, and for me especially, I think that it's important that you get a partner that has something more to offer than only money. I
Mm.
mean, there's a lot of money out there, but there's also a lot of people who, you know, want to make money as they should, obviously. But uh,
Yeah.
I think especially looking for partners that can help us with business development, that knows part of this world that we don't. Because I mean, I know esports very well. I know Dota 2 very well, and I honestly see myself as quite an expert when it comes to a lot of games, and I've always had a very good eye for seeing talent, I think.
Mm.
Um, but when it comes to business development and dealing with non-endemic brands and then going to investments or raising money or whatnot, I mean that's something I'm less talented at, I would say. So
Yeah.
just adding strong partners is for sure important.
Yeah, and it's really good that you identify that, because there does need to be that balance, right? Like with my company, one of our other directors is a COO of one of our investment companies who's responsible for pulling in over $10 million a year in deals for making apps with Hollywood companies. So often I call him the bullshit filter, which is a pretty common Australian saying, but also the
Mm.
business head, where I might bring something to him because I think it's exciting in an esports sense. Like, hey, I get to work with this cool player or do this cool stuff because I've been a fan of theirs for years, or their team. But TJ can say, Chris, this doesn't make any business sense. Like, sure,
Yeah.
you're hyped about it, but he's emotionally removed, and I say, I don't care what you want to do because it doesn't make financial sense. And sometimes that business head, as annoying as it may be, is really helpful in growing a business.
No, I really think so. And I mean, they will also challenge you so that in most cases you will be like, okay, you're right. But then every now and then there will probably be an idea that you're really passionate about and that you're ready to fight for. And I think that also makes it get a better result in that.
Yeah, and the anti case study to like what you were saying really is Optic, right? Where you get kind of 100% bought out or controlled. It's a money making. You get turned into a money making machine. It loses the soul. One of my favorite podcasts of all time is listening to Hex and Nadeshot talk about this.
Yeah.
Hex saying basically they lost the soul and he lost control, and they hired 30 staff, and most of them didn't know what they were doing, and with the goal to, hey, we're making, say, $1 million revenue, let's make that 100 by the end of the year and just pump some money through. And you understand from what you were saying that it's not how esports works. It has to be authentic, and you have to have leaders at the helm, like Patrick Satterman from Fnatic, CS pro player for 10 years, like yourself at Alliance, and various other players at the helm, or at least very close to, with some sort of
Mm,
real staying control.
I agree. I really think so. And I think that fans are very fast at noticing like when things are real and genuine or not. And when they are, as you say there, that suddenly everything is pushed at you as a form of a revenue model. I think that it's fans are very ready to spend money on their favorite teams, and I don't think they mind, but make sure that what you offer them is in a genuine way, and that everything you build up around it is makes sense as well. And I mean that's what I would say is my biggest worry, right? Like with no matter who we work with, I think that everyone wants to drive revenue when it comes to when they want to invest into companies and whatnot. But I do think that that fast growth is something that is, yeah, it's a little bit scary to chase that, because
Mm.
esports wasn't built. I mean, now it sounds like a funny quote, but esports wasn't built in a day. It was. It took so much time from so many different people, and I think that,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of money to be made, but I think that you need to be dare to at least invest some time into it.
Yeah, and like you said, expanding on that passion, a explanation I use a lot to talk to companies is, I feel like, for me, esports is the unloved child a lot of the time, and we've always been punching up so much. Like
Yeah.
there's a StarCraft 2 forum I used to go on all the time called SC2 SEA, and I remember one of the posts in there was saying, Christmas is coming up. If you have any uncles who work for big agencies, they might work for KPMG, they might be a Coca-Cola executive, anything, tell them about esports, tell them about how awesome it is. Let's get people involved. Even working with Thermaltake myself, sponsoring a StarCraft 2 player, one of the first pros in Australia, all these people would buy a keyboard and send me a screenshot just because, hey, you sponsored Pig, we want you involved. And I think a lot of the time, esports people want someone, a grey-haired 60-year-old person, managing director in a suit, to say, we care and we're going to listen. And here's the money, and I trust you guys to keep doing what you're doing. And I'm just going to be that fatherly figure that can provide that advice to you, as you progress. And that means just as much as, them not being involved at all and having an esports player at their head. I think it means even more having the guidance from them and respect.
Yeah, no, I agree completely, honestly. And I mean, yeah, I mean, that's not really going into what you said just now, but I just think that the thing that makes me a little bit sad sometimes is that, as you said earlier, right, we've been punching upwards for quite some time now. Now we've gotten to a point where suddenly people are more excited, and then suddenly companies are coming to us and they're like, oh, esports is this new hype thing. We never heard about it. And we're like, well, we were there knocking. We've been talking to you for years now. You never replied to us. But I just hope that some of these companies need to understand, like, they're gonna miss out. There's still some time, and there's for sure space for companies to come in and sponsor teams or players or whatnot, where you will still be seen as one of these unique brands that were there in the beginning of esports, and it's just how it ends up being, right? Like, if you're there in the right tournaments and you support the right prize pool and whatnot, you're gonna be the good guys, kind of, and it's a lot of brand value. I really think so, and missing out on this is, they're gonna regret it for sure. There's no doubt about it for me. So I just, because there are some partners that we would really, really want to work with, maybe from some personal bias or whatnot, brands that we would just enjoy having on our jersey, but they are not that interested, and that's fine. But I just know that, hey, we're gonna go with a competitor to them, and in a year or two, they're gonna wonder, hey, why didn't we go into this thing with esports? And I think that's important, that some older executives also dare to jump into this without understanding everything. Maybe
what kind of brands do you want to see in this space? Like, automotive has probably been the latest to jump in a big way, with everyone from Toyota to Honda to BMW, Mercedes, etc. Personal care with like Philips and Gillette, and then there's the obvious snack food brands. But like, what's missing? What do you want to see?
Wow, what's missing? I mean, I think it's just a mix of all of those. I mean, clothing brands have popped in more and more, and I think that Champion especially has made quite a heavy push into esports. I think that's great. I think that's actually, I read a study about that, where you could see that even though people might think that gamers or people that watch esports are generally speaking nerdy, but you could see that people that follow esports are, well, by a few percent, more caring about clothes and how they dress and what they're wearing. So I think clothing even more, coming into esports and sponsoring different teams. I think for sure it's something I would like to see. And I think that overall these, how to say, where you just realize that there's more similarities between these different spaces than you might think. I mean, car manufacturers for sure. I think in many cases it would be cool to have companies that are also environmentally caring, I guess. I think that this is maybe not the clearest connection, but I do still think that a lot of people that are watching esports and play games actually do care about what's happening in the world and what's going on and environment. So I could see a good fit there as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it correlates with like Gen Z in general, right? About caring about the environment. And that was a good chat I had with one of my friends from Germany who works as kind of a brand strategist, and saying, there's no point logo slapping on esports if you don't have products that are suitable. And if the only car you make is a big V8 diesel that's terrible for the environment, it's probably not the right place, because even if you throw, hey, this is the car of esports on it, it's people are going to say, well, no, I want a Tesla, or I want a
No,
hybrid, or, I want someone that cares about what I care about.
exactly. I think that's exactly what I mean, right?
Mm.
Yeah, that both levels, right? Like there are more similarities between these different words than you might think, and then also, as you say here, but the fans and the users that follow esports, like they're not stupid. You can't just give them something and sell them a product that is that kind of car, and then you sell it with a commercial that shows like, oh, we are esports. No, people are gonna see through that straight away. You need to find the right space, but if you have a good fit,
Mm.
people will love it. I genuinely believe that people that follow esports, they will choose to buy a brand that sponsors their favorite tournament.
Yeah, there's a good case study of that I laughed. Someone brought up in one of my recent podcasts was about that new governing body that launched, that had a pre-roll including VR yoga and such,
Okay.
saying that they're about esports, and it's very much the same. It's like what you're saying. If you really want to go that full way, you have to be like KFC. You have to make fun of yourself for that and
Yes.
make a dating simulator. You have to be like Dr. Pepper. They've got
Yes.
wacky, crazy League of Legends advertisements that are
Yeah.
hilarious because they're so stupid. But you
Yeah.
can't just say, hey, this is the car for esports, or hey, fellow children, come buy this.
No,
It doesn't work like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I really want to see is more water brands and more health food brands as well. I feel like my basic case study for this, and I've talked about it so much, is if someone has a contact with Subway, please get me in touch, because they're struggling all over the world right now. And it seems perfect because I've created a lot of content at live events like PAX and Melbourne Esports Open and such we have here, and asking people about trends and what brands they want to see. And it's overwhelming, people saying, I want to see more healthy options. I want to see more health food brands. And you can cut through and, like you said, be a pioneer in that space, away from the Dr. Peppers. Coca-Cola, beer has come into the space now too. And sure, they're, okay for people to have from time to time. But I think now is a perfect opportunity for some health food to really get into that
No,
space as
I
well.
think that's honestly a very, very good point. I mean, we've spoken to some, and I mean, that's probably more when it comes to snacks, as you mentioned earlier, but maybe healthy snacks. But I do agree with you there. I think that, competing at a top level, no matter what it is you're competing in, it's beneficial to live healthy and bringing in healthy food or whatnot into the space. I think it would be a very good fit, probably a better fit even than chips or whatnot.
And that was leads me back to another question that I forgot that I meant to ask you before. You talked about you had a mental coach in the past. So there's non-stop psychologists messaging me all the time, mental coaches, physical coaches, everyone wanting to get into the industry. And something that's always been burning in the back of my mind is the West is often about that, is about healthy mind, healthy body, about going to the gym and playing. Whereas the Koreans and the Chinese, for lack of a better term, don't give a shit, throw it out the window, and the Koreans will play 14 hours a day on StarCraft 2 ladder and smash everyone else. So what's your experience? Like, do you have any evidence around this kind of mental coaching and stuff actually helps?
I mean, I think that there is no easy answer to that. I think that there are always different ways of doing things. I completely understand what you mean there about, playing tons of hours and not caring about anything and all of this. I mean, I think like this. I don't think you need to go to the gym. I don't think you need a mental coach. I don't think you need all of these things to win. I think that for some time, maybe it's a few years or whatnot, you if you're at this level, you will be so passionate, you will be so motivated by yourself and playing in itself that is enough. And in those cases, I really don't think it matters if you go work out or you take care of yourself or whatever. You know what I mean? But you might not be able to sustain this lifestyle for more than those years, and you might burn out then after 4 years instead of playing for 10 years. And that's where I think it's important to bring in all of these things. I also think that certain people and players are different. Some people need a mental coach to kind of unlock that next level of what they have in them. Some people, they're just that driven by themselves, and they don't really need anything except themselves to achieve it. So I don't think there is an easy answer. I think both sides work, but I think that the reason people care about it more and more nowadays is probably more so to protect yourself or your players from burning out, from getting sick, from all these things, because
Mm.
tournament schedule is quite intense, and when you lose a player from a tournament, you have to play with a stand-in. It's not a great thing, and I think that's why it's more and more important. I would also like
Yeah.
to point in and say that, I mean, I can't speak too much about Korea because I don't know it as close, but I know that, for example, in China, I know for a fact that they have had issues in recent years that a lot of their young players burn out very, very quickly because
Mm.
there is just so much pressure and time put into it. So yeah, there's no easy answer. But I mean, I guess if I say anything, I think that to be at the top, you need to play a lot. And I think that playing 14 hours a day is probably not only in Korea and Asia. I think that there are a fair amount of Western players that play that amount as well. And I think it works. I think that committing yourself that much works for a while, but it also goes back into what you and me talked about earlier today. Like, you can't only play to become better. You can't just play Dota 2 and improve and become this. No, you need to start, how do you practice? What do you aim to do in your pubs?
Mm.
Do you learn to work better with people or whatnot? Yeah, it was a long answer, but I think you know what I'm
Yeah.
getting at.
No, I think you're right for sure. Like using two gym analogies to what you talk about. Using a personal trainer when you first start going to the gym can help you teach what to do so then you can do it yourself. You already know how to deadlift and bench press and protect yourself. So you only need that. And maybe every now and then you need a bit of a top up. You can
Yeah,
bring them in, like you were saying, your team was struggling a little bit. So you can bring them in for a week, for
yeah,
2 weeks. The same as a gym, you can bring them in for 1 or 2 sessions and say, hey, is my deadlift form still okay? Am I safe? Is there any new research I should learn about to protect myself? And the other thing, like you were saying too, is another gym analogy is, my girlfriend started going back to the gym again recently, and she's gone from a 60 kilo to a 105 kilo deadlift in a short amount of time. But then there's only a certain amount of percentage that starts going up after that. And
yeah.
once you reach that peak, then it's about a game of 0.5%, 0.25%. How do you make yourself better? And maybe in the past, esports hasn't gotten to a place where players have reached that skill ceiling. So the ones in Korea that don't care about the mental coach and gym can just play, and they don't care about that 0.5% because they don't need to throughout
Yeah.
that time. But maybe now that we're starting to see all these proper high performance facilities come into place, with teams from Complexity to 100 Thieves, etc., with these real facilities, maybe that's when the game of 0.5%, 0.25% will start coming in. But
I really believe so, and I think that's a very, very good way of putting it. And I think especially now, we are at a point where this 0.5% might be deciding between if you're going to win or lose something. So for sure. I mean, that being said, I also think that there will still be. I mean, the reason everyone is doing this and all the teams are building these facilities, I mean, it's to make the chance higher that people will get to this level of performance. At the same time, there will be examples of people that will just come in from nowhere. They're 16 years old. They have no experience of anything, and they just destroy everyone. And those are the examples where we're like, what's the secret? What's all this work we're putting in? When we see someone like Anna, for example, who's such a
Thompson,
unique player, is so good. Yeah, but Anna even more so, I think, in some ways, because for Anna, you can almost see that he has played pubs with his 4 friends a lot of times. And he learned how to carry a game when he had 4 people really, really trying to help him win the game for them. And that's kind of what I saw happen in OG as well. They played in a way where they would all, including Thompson, and that's what made Thompson so amazing. That he would start buying Solar Crest from mid and just helping it, using it to push Anna into even bigger strength. And yeah, I just think it's such a remarkable combination of people and how everything just fit well for them.
Yeah, and part of what you're talking about to me says Fortnite. I was at a competition over the weekend at the Australian Open Tennis, one of the biggest tennis events in the world. They had a $500,000 Fortnite competition across 2 days, 100K for charity, and then 400K solos. 100K first place prize was won by a 15-year-old playing on a controller. And he beat players from FaZe 100 Thieves, Cloud9, Gen G, FPX from China. This kid had 1,200 Twitter followers, unsigned. He'd won $3,000 in his life, and he's
Yeah,
15 years old. And
yeah,
it's crazy. He just won 100. He just won $100,000, and now he's got
yeah,
20,000 Twitter followers instantly.
yeah.
And I'm sure he's got offers left, right, and center from organizations trying to take advantage of him. But it's crazy to me that can happen. And I think I haven't seen that too much in my knowledge of Dota, where a 15-year-old will come through. Maybe Samael would be a great example, under 18, winning $1 million. But it
Yeah,
seems
I
to
mean,
be so
I
prominent in
just,
Fortnite.
yeah, no, I just think it's different though. I mean, you have to keep in mind, I mean, how old is Fortnite? The game has been around, what, 2 years?
Mm.
And that just leaves the room for that happening at a much bigger chance, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And
And more
then,
randomness, right?
yeah, but it's also how I mean, like how it is in a lot of these new games, and that's what I think is funny if you take it from a business perspective and how some of our orgs are working. Like you have
Mm.
these new games and you don't really have any idea, especially for a game like Fortnite. Like it's quite different from an FPS. So you don't really know who's actually gonna become the best. So what everyone does is
Yeah.
they probably invest in players that are, he was really good at this FPS game, and probably can learn building and whatnot. But the truth of the matter, especially in the first 1-2 years of games, this thing happening is fairly likely that it will happen sometime at least, especially in solo games. I think more so than in team games, because when it comes to team games, I mean, obviously you have to build up this teamwork and all of these things. Uh, and I wouldn't say it's exactly the same thing, but I do think something similar happened in Wings, the team who won TI6. They were not unknown, not at all, but they had played a lot of Dota 1 and they played together for a lot doing that, and they were maybe like a tier 2 Chinese team.
Mm.
But I mean, they came from pretty much nowhere. I mean, we got to play them at an early stage, and actually, Esfor from our team, he was the guy who noticed. He was like, these guys are actually gonna be. They have something unique about them, but they kind of came from nowhere and surprised the Dota world and community in about 1 year, and then
Mm.
won TI. So I think it's room for it. I mean, but that's also what's the beauty about esports, but maybe not only esports, other sports as well, right? That there's always this dream or idea that there might be some guy somewhere that is super good at this game and he just didn't get the chance to play at the right place.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is how you think about the game, right? After consuming a bunch of that content about OG, they just seem to think about the game in the way it operates differently to others. And you see the meta change with IO, you see the meta change with Admiral Bulldog, making everyone pick Nature's Prophet and rat each other all the time. It's a lot of the time it's that team can change the meta entirely, and that's what gives them a big difference. And that used to be the competitive advantage and disadvantage of Australia, where Renegades, when they were new, could upset bigger teams because Australians were hyper aggressive and people weren't ready for that. Hyper aggressive aim styles that, until people learn how to shut down that aggression, they could take some maps off some very high people who weren't expecting them to be a threat whatsoever.
Yeah.
Same way that
It's a
if
good.
Arna picks IO into you, you're probably thinking, "What is this idiot doing?" And then he
Yeah,
found it 15 minutes later.
no, for sure. I mean, in example with me, I've always, and that's probably what made me unique as well. I always believed that there was a thought about behind something, and I always thought like there is so
Mm,
much to be done in this game that usually when people picked something stupid, I was usually the guy that said, no, they have some idea behind this where my teammates would be like, they're just trolling, they're not even trying.
yeah.
But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I used to love that thing in Counter Strike where someone would be standing in a place that someone else would say is really shitty, and you'd say, "Well, you died to them." So
Yeah, no, I
you
agree,
know,
and that's a funny thing, right? Because I actually had this conversation with Nico just the other day about how I think something that's very important, especially for players at the absolute top, is like don't forget that even people that are worse than you might have something or have some idea or some way of playing that you can learn from. Maybe that's the reason why they're actually even close to you in skill level. Maybe
Yeah.
you're just raw skill, but you're not even thinking about the game. That's what I've had to learn
Yeah.
countless of times throughout my career. And I think that's a huge reason of why I could stay relevant throughout Dota 1, but then also come back in Dota 2 and win TI and these things. It's because I
Mm.
learned things from people and players that were, I would call, worse than me. But I saw that, hey, they look at this game so differently. I think that I talked about this many times before, but I think Eternal Envy was a good example for us where we kicked him and then we went on to become the alliance that won TI3 and countless other tournaments. But the truth was, he was quite far behind the rest of us when it came to like skill and playing on a team, I would say. But he
Mm.
had some really, really good ideas when it came to the mechanics of the game
Mm.
and strategy of the game. And I think a huge part of what he taught us was what what we brought with us, and we could combine with what we already have, and that was the reason why we won TI. I really think so.
Yeah, I think a way to wrap up so much of what you talked about today in being a player is a quote I like to use, which is you need to learn how to learn. And instead of just blindly watching replays and just seeing, oh, they buy a Solar Crest mid, oh, I should buy that too, thinking why, what's the
Yeah,
purpose? And,
yeah.
this is what taught me a lot. There was one guy, our team captain, who was also our sniper and our main fragger at the same time, which is ridiculous in his own right. And now he's a doctor, so there's nothing he can't do. Explained to me, watch Zist in NIP at that stage, watch him go B tunnels on T side, and I played the same position. Why does he aim where he aims first, second, third? Why does he pre-fire mid doors every now and then? Why does he throw a nade short? Sometimes he doesn't. And then when his teammate dies at long A, what does he do? And why does he do that? And
Yeah,
really thinking deeply about all of those. And it's almost like a mathematical calculation in your head that you don't have to consciously think about anymore. It's, oh, my team player died in upper B. I know exactly what to do. My teammate at long died. I know what to do. Or I know the strategy that we're likely about to execute, judging by where the split and pick went,
yeah,
and what happened at any one time.
yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
think that's a good point.
So you're a busy man. I've asked you a lot of questions, but it's been a really good chat. I
Yeah,
really enjoyed it. And
I enjoyed it, mate.
there's been some good Twitch discussion too. So for anyone who's watching this who would like to follow you or would like to learn more, especially on the LinkedIn side, we've got a lot of investors and companies that listen to this podcast. Where can they reach out to you?
I mean, you can reach out to me at Twitter at Loda Berg. I mean, at LinkedIn, I'm not really sure. Jonathan Berg. I think you can search for it there. Working for Alliance. Not sure if I should give out my email here,
That's okay.
but
LinkedIn's, they can send you an email. That's enough.
yeah, but reach out to me at LinkedIn. I mean, I'm always very open to take a conversation about esports, even though it's not always to leads directly to investment. I do care overall. I do care a lot about esports as a whole, and I mean we're here fighting as a business as well. But to me, it's always, and that we didn't really talk about that either. But I think that's a huge part of what makes us unique, maybe, and how it affects my work as a CEO is that the players always come first for us, and we make a business around that as well. But I care about the players. I care about the health of the ecosystem, and that's probably what makes us unique as a player on board.
Yeah, no, I see that too, and it's a big part of wanting to have people like you and PPD on, because while you and PPD have different personalities, I feel a lot of the time you have the similar care and different ways of communicating. People like you, people like Patrick Satterman at Chief Gaming Officer at Fnatic, these kind of people that were pro players for 10 plus years, or still are in PPD's case, that have that real care and deep nurturing and understanding of the industry, are the kind of people that need to be in those positions of authority and positions where they can enact change going forward, or at least listen to in
Yeah,
advisory
and I mean,
capacities.
I really appreciate that. I think that all of them are great people, and I think those are good examples of it. But because, it's not necessarily that we always have to be in the position where everyone listens to us, but I do think that there is for sure something we have learned throughout these years that gives us a good understanding of the ecosystem. And, it's not always because we care about the players genuinely, because we do, but it's also because we know how important they are to how all of this works. and honestly, they are the stars that the fans follow. So yeah.
And you know what you're going to get on a lighter note on LinkedIn now is you're going to get a lot of messages from people in Asia wanting alliance to expand there, and you're going to get a lot of messages from people in Africa because
Oh,
they're
Africa,
two
really?
people. Yeah, they're two sets of people that are super common, bugging me all the time to, well, bugging's not the right word, but being in contact with me all the time to try to advance their local scenes. I think there's some hyper
Mm,
growth in both those
yeah,
areas.
no, I think Southeast Asia is honestly a natural fit. We've already talked to some partners there, but super open to it. I mean,
Awesome.
I lived in Singapore, so it's one of my homes. Africa is I've been to South Africa and discussed esport there, not the rest of the continent so much.
Mm.
But before I end, if we're getting towards the end, I actually grew up in Congo Kinshasa, so it's funny that you
Oh, wow.
brought up Africa as a continent going to esports.
Yeah, there's so much advantage because it's like, if you're thinking about where they are in technology adoption, it's kind of Southeast Asia has reached that kind of first world technology adoption now, and
Yeah,
just behind them is India, and then just behind them is Africa. So it's like, how far into the future do you want to look when you're
yeah.
expanding to Southeast
No, that's
Asia,
really
India, or
exciting.
Africa?
That's super exciting. And I mean, especially
Mm.
for these regions. I mean, with mobile gaming and mobile phones becoming much, much better, seeing especially mobile esport growing in these regions seems,
Mm.
it's a given to me that it's gonna take off. Because
You don't,
people love competing. I think this is like when we talk about esports, we always have to remember like it's about competition. The reason why we play games, at least for a lot of us, it's not just because it looks funny and all these things. It's because we've always loved competing. I think human beings love competing, and I think
yeah,
that's doesn't
yeah,
matter where in the world you are. There's always going to be a hunger to be the best at something. Yeah,
yeah. No, it makes sense to me. So thanks again, mate. I've taken a lot of your time, and I know you're a busy man, as am
no
I.
problem.
So thanks for
It's
coming
it's
on.
it's been a pleasure. Take care, man.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's watching on LinkedIn Live, Twitch, and also listening to this VOD as it comes out later on the Big Esports podcast. We'll be doing many more of these episodes coming out very soon. Hopefully, we've got some more players lined up from different industries, as well as some very big name guests that are coming through the door now, which is fantastic. So make sure you follow us at Big Esports GG on all socials, or you can reach out to me at Smithy Mayo on all socials, and especially LinkedIn. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Okay. Cheers. Bye bye.